friends, and welcome to the Co-Regulated Canines podcast. I'm Ashley Cipoletti, your host, and I'm on a mission to create more connection. Dogs are really just the starting point. Together, we'll explore how to live with more harmony, ease, and healing so we can show up more as the best version of ourselves, not just for our dogs, but also for our community and our planet too. So grab a coffee and let's dive in. Hey, party people. I hope you are having a wonderful day, as I am. Today I had 3 back-to-back training sessions that just went lovely, and I was like on cloud 9. I'm like, I can't wait to record my podcast to go over some of the things that were kind of the main themes of today and session. So hope you're ready. Buckle up. It's going to be a good one. And mostly wanting to go over this concept of what to do when dogs eat things that they shouldn't, and how our energy, I hate that word. I think someone ruined this word with dogs on TV, but how our energy can impact the outcomes we have in training, and also how tone, pitch, enthusiasm, all of this works and more. So starting off, I have multiple clients right now that have dogs that are just like eating everything. Like they're like frantically eating mulch and rocks and cigarettes and trash and like literally anything, where we're, in the midst of maybe getting a Pica diagnosis for one of them. And the other one, where I think it's a little bit more like she just was really under socialized and is excited. And I think we can maybe like train our way out of it, so to speak. But anyways, I want to talk about that because we're like, it's a little strange if you think about it, of like, why would dogs obsessively eat like grass and rocks and mulch and trash and all these things that are making them sick, especially if they're being fed, have access to chews and enrichment and all these things. It's like, why would they still do that? And I don't have the exact answers to it, but my initial instinct or gut reaction is, I think it's partly instinctual, and I think partly driven by maybe the gut biome being a little wonky. And it's tough to say because I think even in people, it's really hard to figure out if our guts and microbiome are like optimized, for lack of a better word. Like a lot of us feel a lot of GI discomfort quite frequently, myself included. And I know that we can sometimes have like nutrient deficiencies that can drive maybe like certain cravings, of like, even like for women in our hormonal cycles, there are certain times when we have cravings to get nutrients like magnesium. Like if we want dark chocolate around a certain time of the month, that's to get more magnesium, which is fascinating. So there's little things like that I'm just curious of. It's certainly not my expertise. I just geek out about it and find this interesting to look into in my spare time. But I think there's definitely a component of that. And dogs don't really get to choose what they're eating, and they're kind of scavengers. So I think a lot of them are going to eat what's, in front of them more often than not. But I think that there's a spectrum of where it feels like within the normal range. And then there's a spectrum of where it feels like this is unusual. Like this is happening a lot. Where it just feels almost like an obsessive compulsion that they can't really like have a neutral feeling. They're just constantly needing to put everything in their mouths and swallow it and eat it, which can be dangerous and cost a lot of money. And then there are some that are just young dogs that are like, ooh, and they're mouthy, and they just explore the world and understand it better by putting things in their mouth. And many dogs don't swallow what they chew and put in their mouth. And many dogs do. The ones that do are the ones that are much more, I think, anxiety provoking to live with, because you're like always scared of a giant medical bill coming your way if you take your eyes off your dog. And it's also tough because it's hard to let them just sniff and be a dog if the second like they put their nose to the ground, they're swallowing something that you didn't see, especially if you live in a city or a suburb. I feel like there's a lot more sketchy shit for them to eat. I mean, maybe even in rural areas, depending on where you walk your dog. Or they can even eat organic matter that makes them sick. So I get it. People have a lot of anxiety about this, and for good reason. But also, it's not totally fair to expect our dogs to be a robot and to stare at us the entire time that they're on outings. So some people like to implement muzzle training for dogs that have pica, where they just are eating everything around them. That's unsafe, which is an option, but a lot of people are averse to that idea or don't really know how to train a dog to be comfortable wearing a muzzle, or they live in certain areas where like, I don't know, my dog just doesn't like things on their nose. And I get that because it does require some time and effort. And some dogs are just really sensitive to things being on their face. And there's stigma associated with it, of course, but it's an option. And for some, we can teach rock solid leave-its or do more like further testing into their gut biome to see like if we change their nutrition, does the obsessively trying to frantically eat everything behavior go down. So where I'm going with this is with dog training in general, I think there's a belief or a stigma that's like, do this or else, or I am the commander and you obey, like stereotypically, or, that's how it's been, or being always like, it's what we reward or punish. And there's more to it because you have to look at what is driving a behavior. And a lot of times it can be instinct, it can be genetics, it can be nutrition, discomfort, pain, inflammation, nutrient deficiencies. It can be a combination of a lot of things. And sometimes it can even be anxiety driven of just this like almost kind of like OCD in people of, okay, I'm feeling a little bit anxious and then I obsessively do this behavior that I have to do. And then it's kind of reinforcing this pattern in the brain of I feel a certain type of way. I grab something, makes me feel better. And for some dogs, that's grabbing things in the mouth and swallowing it frantically. So if you calm that anxiety down, you can sometimes see that behavior also go down. But a lot of this is an educated guessing game to a degree of trying to be curious of what could influence behavior because there's probably infinite amount of factors. And the more experience you have in this industry, the better equipped you are to take these educated guesses. You know which ones are more common, or if you see these trends of patterns, you're kind of like, all right, let's try this. And sometimes it requires getting a team behind you and working with vets or nutritionists or veterinary behaviorists to get to the bottom of it. And some people have limited finances. So that has to come into the equation of how best to solve those tricky cases. But for the vast majority of dogs that do not have pica, where they're not just like truly having like a medical condition, eating things that aren't food and potentially killing themselves with it, for the dogs that are just like kind of obsessing over chewing, grabbing, and they're kind of just mouthy dogs, I find teaching them to leave things like with a leave it helpful, but also just like through something called shaping. What shaping means, and I'll probably go over this in numerous podcast episodes since it's my favorite way to train, is we're really like looking at behaviors that your dog is already doing that are either close to our end goal or could be our end goal. So for example, instead of like luring them away from a leave it or like something they shouldn't have by putting a treat in front of their nose and moving them away, it would be catching the moment that they looked at the thing we want them to leave alone and they haven't gone for it yet, or it's not in their mouth yet. And we could say yes and treat that and do that over and over again. Yes, treat, yes, treat. You could find probably a million opportunities in an hour walk even. This is why you could go through a lot of food, of them leaving the thing. And you're shaping all these different behaviors that are their idea. You're not like prompting them to do it. And sometimes prompting them is effective. I like to teach a leave it, but I don't like to just rely on that because otherwise you'll constantly be like, leave it, leave it, leave it, leave it. And I'm like, God, you sound like a broken record. And now you're probably just nagging your dog and it's going to make them like respond less to your voice, find it less exciting. So I like when I prompt dogs, meaning when I'm asking them to do a skill, I like to use that sparingly because I want it to be magical. Like when they hear my voice, it matters. Because we talk all the time. They're learning to tune us out. So I purposely talk to dogs in a different tone and a different octave than when I talk to everybody else. And I might look insane because my pitch and tone can go quite high, but it works. So that way they know I'm talking to them. And I also sometimes will say their name first before asking them to do a skill if it's been a minute. So they know I'm talking to them. I'll be like, Sadie, leave it, or Betty, come. So that way they know who I'm talking to and that I'm talking to them. And what can start to happen when you practice in that way too is they just hear their name. They're gonna look at you, which you can mark and reword. You're like, great. You're not eating something that you shouldn't be that could hurt you when you're looking at me. You can't, I mean, ideally, because if it's not in their mouth already, if they already grabbed it, then they certainly can. But if you say their name and they look to you and they were about to grab something, you got that leave it kind of already, and you can mark and reinforce that. And then you want to mark and reinforce all these little moments, these little opportunities that they continue to leave it. So often we just say leave it and we treat it once, and then the dog goes right back to going for the thing because they have to learn to leave it and keep leaving it, not just leave it means look at me, get the treat, then go back to getting the thing. I also find that the it that they're leaving is really ambiguous. So I think how I like to look at it is I'm like, I kind of like to teach that leave it really just means like stop what you're focusing on and look to me, which you could teach with any word if you really think of it. Some people could do watch me, or you could just say their name, because that gets you the function of them leaving it. And that's really what it is. And to continue looking at you. So anyways, I'm on a little bit of a tangent about it, but I've been seeing that come up quite a lot in my clients lately where I'm like, this is like unusual, just like an uptick in dogs obsessively wanting to eat like mulch and things like that. Also, I think part of it is instinctual. I found this really interesting in Costa Rica. I was observing some street dogs that were obviously off leash, doing their thing, and have all of the freedom of choice and enrichment in the world. They're like on the beach in Costa Rica, and they were really well cared for by the community that they lived in. So these weren't like dogs that looked like they were on the brink of death. These were like very well cared for street dogs. And I noticed that they were like foraging through like sticks and grass and God knows what. They were like sniffing and eating organic matter on the ground that I wasn't close enough to see what it was, but they were kind of obsessively almost like how I call it like dogs turn into little cows when they just fixate on eating grass. I saw some of that even in the street dogs, which was just interesting to observe. So part of it I think might be instinctual. And then one of my clients got like a compost type mulch down in her backyard, and all three of her dogs were obsessing over eating it because it smells like manure. So we were like, would all three do this? We're kind of data testing. I was like, oh, is it just one of the dogs that's the notorious for eating mulch, or and then one of them learned from her, or are they all wanting to do it? And I tested it with each dog individually, then with two of each dog, and then all three, and had different behavioral outcomes from that, which was fascinating. And so one of them on her own, she's the one who eats everything. She was going for it, but I've been training with her primarily. So she was on it once I was like asking her name and to leave it and practicing recall. She was like a rock star. Then when I added in her best friend that she loves to play, chase and stuff with, that we also do a lot of training with, she was okay. She was better. But she wasn't perfect. She was definitely better alone, but she still did a pretty good job. And then when all three dogs were out, she was fixating on eating the mulch a lot more, where I was like, interesting. And also in context, we have not practiced a ton of training recently with all three dogs. We started off that way, and then one of the dogs got sick. So we primarily work on either just her and her bestie. And it was interesting to see when all three were in the picture that there's a pretty drastic behavior change with the mulch eating. And when the third dog came in solo, he was obsessed with eating the mulch as well. But when he was with all the dogs, when it was all three of them, he was mostly interested in being around me and avoiding the other two dogs. Also fascinating. And then the second one, who's the bestie, she was kind of like, she wasn't obsessing over eating it. She was more interested in training and interested in chasing lizards, which is her MO. But she did fantastic in today's session too. So just an interesting food for thought moment that I've been hearing a lot of people struggling with dogs eating mulch or dirt or rocks and things. And I think part of it is instinctual, part might be the gut. And also interesting that it changes depending on the context of, in this scenario, how many dogs were out there. And that maybe it's the dynamic, maybe it's because we haven't practiced these skills with all three as much, or maybe there's a little more stress involved. Who knows? But interesting. Could dive into that a little bit more. And this brings up another really good topic, which is of looking at your training with a detective hat, being curious about it. Because like I said earlier, there is infinite amount of outcomes not outcomes, influences to behavior, I think. I'm assuming it could be infinite. And it changes so much depending on if the environment's slightly different. Is it windy? I don't know, did they sleep well? Like there are so many factors that are out of our control. So when we get curious, instead of looking at it as they're disobeying me and I need to reward or correct that behavior or else, instead it's like, just get curious and try to be observant of like, do you notice any patterns that exist when this behavior does or does not happen? And really looking at training as learning and teaching. And so if you're trying to teach someone, we can use the example of like learning a sport. I play volleyball and I can use this as an example. If I'm trying to learn a new volleyball skill, you learn through learning the most basic foundational skills, and then you kind of like stack that foundation on top of each other and practice. You do drills and you do reps and reps and reps. And then you try and replicate what it would be like in an actual game. And even then, the real game is totally different than practice because you're having to think about all of these other things. And you're not taught volleyball through, okay, well, if you make a mistake in the learning process, we're going to like kick your knees out by adding discomfort. Like nobody's going to do that. Like that would be absurd. If people do that, they should go to jail. That's ridiculous. Like you learn by setting you up for success and challenging you enough to grow and giving you feedback on that worked well, that didn't. But now we have to think that our dogs don't speak the same verbal language that we do, nor are they intrinsically motivated by what we are. So when you sign up for a sport, you are saying, I want to learn, or like practice for a sport. You are signing up saying, I want to learn this skill to be good at this game, because that is your motivation, more or less. And you have your language to say, I don't understand this, or can you make that? Can you adjust this? And you can say, hey, it was your leg here, or it was, you need to move to the right more. But if you don't have that language piece, and if the individual is not intrinsically motivated for that same end goal, you have an ethics like matter on your hands, because like why would a dog want to be good at volleyball? Like it would make no sense to them. They're not naturally motivated for that. So you have to tap into what your dog is motivated by ethically. If you're just using brute force or harming them to, like, if they make a mistake, it's like, that's not a place to learn. And I think most people this day and age, even trainers that use harsher methods or like more balanced methods, are not usually recommending training in this way anymore. I feel like I've seen a shift, at least from what I've seen online. And it doesn't mean that you don't give them feedback if they make a mistake. You're not just like, everything's right. Yay. Good. Like, I mean, you could, but you might confuse them, because if they don't have clarity, you're going to create some anxiety and confusion. And when we're looking at when we're just looking at training, you have to really look at it with this lens of you're teaching, and you're teaching a skill to a non-English speaking, non-verbal, non-human species. So what's in it for them? Why should they do this? I like to try to make it fun. And how I try to do that is by looking for body language signs in the dogs I'm working with. So what that looks like is loose, wiggly behavior, body language, where they're like, oh yeah, that was so fun. Or they're doing things with speed. They're like, oh my gosh, they're turning on a dime. They're just pumped to work with you. Or they look to you for more. So if you give them a break and you're like, okay, all done. And they're like looking at you like, let's do the thing again. That tells you they're interested. Like you've got them motivated. Whatever you're using as a reinforcer, they're down. They're like, hell yeah. But if you take the brakes off, or if you put the brakes on, and they walk away, or they run away or look away, those are signs that they're probably a little bit uncomfortable. And the way that we are training may not have the intent that we anticipated, like the intent or the intended effect. I think that's what I mean to say. Meaning that if we're thinking we're rewarding with Cheerios and they're taking it, but they're not enthusiastic about it, they're just being polite, and probably avoiding conflict by looking away, that tells you something. So then I try to pivot. Our end goal with training should be tapping into our dog's motivations and making it fun, or we can adjust our expectations. And this is going to be different for every dog and owner pairing, because sometimes there are behaviors that our dogs do that can be unsafe, that can be uncomfortable, frustrating, anxiety provoking, you name it. And so that tells us that the human's boundaries are being crossed. If they're feeling unsafe, anxious, I don't know, are just like literally getting hurt by what the dog is doing, then that tells us something needs to adjust or change in the dynamic. But dogs are just being dogs. Like at the end of the day, they're out here like on their walk. They don't know what your goal is. They don't know that today we're going to work on heel walking. Like they don't know that. They're just like, oh my gosh, I'm outside, squirrels, dogs, there's trees. Like they're just like literally thriving, like happy to be alive, like wanting to smell all the things and taking in all their senses. And they're inhibited by leashes if we have them on one. So they're already like, oh my God, like probably a little frustrated. And leashes create tension on the body. So they're probably just like, oh my God, like let me at it. So keeping that in mind, we can adjust our expectations and be like, oh, well, it's probably going to be chaos. Here we go. Or we can try and set them up for success easier, and go the training route. But every dog, and again, every dog and owner pairing is different. Some people love an exuberant greeting hello, and some people hate that. Some people live with grandma who is frail and can't tolerate it if a dog jumps on them. And some, it's like totally fine. So I, as your dog trainer, don't really, I don't necessarily care what your goal is per se, or what your needs are. I do care, but meaning like, I don't care if one person's like, oh, I want my dog to jump or sleep in the bed with me. Like, I don't care. Cool. But if someone's like, oh, this makes me unsafe or hurts me, then okay, well, we have to communicate that to the dog or make it impossible for that behavior to happen if it's hard for the owner to motivate and practice enough with them, which is a soapbox for another time, going into that in more detail. But I just thought it brought up like an interesting point of, what motivates us, what motivates our dogs, and understanding that they don't speak the same language, verbal language as you. So when we sit down for a session and we're talking about our goals for the day and what we're working on, they're not consenting to that. They don't hear it and they're not like, okay, yeah, got it. Sounds good. Can't wait to practice looking at you in front of distractions today. Like they don't know that. They're just outside being dogs and doing habits. So always good to keep that in mind. And it can feel really frustrating on the human end as you are learning these skills, because you're like, this is how it should be. I'm watching a video with step-by-step instructions and my dog is just not doing the thing. Like, like they're the worst. They're being bad. I need to fix this. And instead it's like, let's remove that and remember everyone is different. and that your dog didn't sign up for these training classes, and they don't understand what your goal is. And that might not be, actually, in fact, is not their goal too. They're just out here living, which is kind of a wholesome, adorable thing. So yes, it can be frustrating. And also just remember that your dog's not out to get you. They're truly just taken in their senses and happy to be alive, which is a beautiful thing. So what do we do then if our dogs can just not hear us or focus or do the thing? Does that mean they're untrainable? And the answer to that is no. Training, again, is teaching. So we can be strategic teachers, and that's where a guide or a coach or like hiring a trainer is really helpful, because they have more experience and tools and learnings and education to pull from to help your dog have the success that you're hoping for. So to help your dog understand the lesson that you're wanting them to learn. And it's going to look different for every dog. I wish I could say, just do this one thing, but everyone learns a little bit differently. And there are some dogs that feel really icky about a lot of social pressure being put on, meaning we want them to do the thing. We're looking at them. We're standing over them. We're in their personal bubble. Like, that is a lot for some dogs that are just like, please give me like space. Where we would handle that type of a dog different than the types of dogs that are like, personal space, what's that? And they're like sitting on your lap, like gigantic dog on your shoulders. Like, you know what I mean? There's just a lot of nuance to it. So remember that if you're feeling frustrated, that there's not a one size fits all, like this is the only way to teach this skill. And if your dog doesn't know this skill, you're doomed. Really anything that you train, again, can be taught. And if you are stuck, that's a good indicator of calling in for reinforcements, meaning calling in for help from an expert or a guide that you trust to help work through that with you and your dog. And again, sometimes it's adjusting our goalposts and expectations, and other times it's a totally reasonable goal and can be done. And we might just need to pull from different prior experiences or ideas. Okay, I'm like trying to think of one other little snippet from today that I wanted to share with you guys. Oh yeah, and that is the energy piece. So a certain someone, I'm just going to call him out on TV, Cesar Millan. I watched The Dog Whisperer growing up. And I remember like, it's always about like your energy. And we might be talking about some of the same things, but like it gives me the ick just because it's him and the way that he said it. I think it was framed in a way that made a lot of women feel bad about themselves for like not being like confident alpha dominators. And like, I hate that shit. So I don't know. What I mean though by energy is truly like, are we enthusiastic and high pitch and like have a lot of animation to our tone, our voice, our movements? Or are we low, slow, calm? Or are we, hey, no, or like erratic? Are we anxious and like, don't do that, don't do that? You know, like all of these have different energies. And what I mean by that too is like when you walk into a space with someone who has chaotic energy, like you feel that in your physical body. Or someone who feels really grounded and calm, you feel that. Or if someone's just like so charismatic and like life of the party, you feel energized around them. So tapping into that concept can help with your training outcomes. So if you're wanting to get a behavior that's fast, that's enthusiastic and like super fun, you have to be fast, enthusiastic, and super fun. And 9 out of 10 times, most people want that kind of a response with recall, maybe even 10 out of 10 times, I should say. And a lot of times they'll be like, Sadie, come. And like, that's it. Or they'll say it really quiet, like, Sadie, come. And the dog's like a mile away, like chasing a squirrel. And you're like, that's truly never going to work. I'm sorry. It just won't. But then if you look and you see, you can sometimes see other dog or animal people or trainers out in the real world, and they're always very like animated with it. They'll be like, Sadie, come. Yeah. Like this, like fun, high pitched, loud tone. They're clapping, they're moving backwards, like they're tapping into your dog's fun and joy. And they're like throwing a party for them when they get it. Versus, Sadie, come. Like, that sounds so boring. If they're like chasing a squirrel, do you know how fun that is for a predator to be mid-chase or following movement? I'm sorry. Like, we probably don't really get it because we don't consider ourselves predators, but like we are. But dogs definitely are more sensitive to movement than we are. So if you want to be more fun, you can toss a treat as long as they see you toss it. That tossing can be fun. If we move backwards, that's fun. If we run the opposite direction, that can be fun. But adding in movement is a really good way to make your energy more animated and fun, to get that more enthusiastic response versus just standing there stationary and being like, come, and feeding them in place. Like, that's pretty boring. So if they're doing something crazy fun and you're competing with that, wanting them to come off that and come to you for less fun, it's like, why would they? We have to remember, again, they don't have the same goalposts that they consented to as you and I do. They don't know what you're trying to do in your like training course. They're like, wait, what? They didn't sign up for that. They're just doing dog things. So if you're competing with dogs doing dog things, then you have to basically be a dog and be fun. And it's going to feel ridiculous, but it works and it's worth it. And in the same breath, if you're dealing with a jumpy, mouthy dog, they're going to be jumpy and mouthy when they're excited. That's like the number one fuel for jumpy mouthiness is excitement. So if you come into a greeting and they've been home alone all day, they're going to be pumped to see you. They're social creatures. You open the door. And if you're like, hi, oh my God, like they're going to be so excited. Like they're probably going to pee themselves and like jump in mouth and oh my gosh. Versus if you come in and you're calm and quiet, doesn't mean ignoring them. You can acknowledge their presence. Like imagine being home alone all day and you're so social and high energy and the person that you love the most comes home from work and ignores you. That's like emotional abuse. Sorry. I just think like that advice sucks. And I think you can calmly acknowledge, you can say, hi, oh, it's good to see you too. Good. And continue walking or put your things down. You know, there's other things you can do to be calm, but still acknowledge that they exist. They're social. Like their lives are so small. Let's not take away all their joy. So yeah, food for thought on thinking about what energy you bring in. Because if you're calm, you're going to get more calm. If you're excited, you're going to get more excited. And you can tap into those strategically. And the same goes for if you're working or dealing with or adopting a fearful dog. And if you go in kind of afraid or like super outgoing and handsy and touchy, you're going to freak them out. You have to be soft and patient and quiet and like let them have their space. Let them feel comfortable to come to you. You can't force that. But if you're like a super handsy, crazy, high energy person, then maybe you should get a dog that's like, you know, Mr. Wigglebutt Central, who's like, wow, that can match you on that. That would probably be a more compatible pairing than being paired with a dog that's really sensitive to space and touch and social pressure, because they are going to be like repelled by that energy. And you will have to learn to be soft and patient and not take it personally when they need space. So hope you got something out of today's sessions, of just a little snippet behind the scenes, things we were working on today in our sessions. And I hope that it expanded your perspectives or your thoughts on dogs and behavior and training as a whole. It was just a little nugget, but I hope that nugget plants a seed that you then continue to water and turns into a beautiful plant that helps really grow your connection with your dog, your connection with yourself, and your connection with the world. All right, well, see you next week. Thanks for hanging out with me on the Co-Regulated Canines podcast. If you love this episode, it would mean the world to me if you subscribed, left a review, and shared with a friend. Your support helps more people and their dogs find a little more ease and connection in their lives. Want to dive deeper? Follow me on Instagram at Co-Regulated Canines. That's CO_regulated, the letter K, the number 9, S, or head to www.coregulatedcanines.com for more resources. Until next time, take care of yourself, take care of your pup, and keep building those connections.